It's interesting because when I was very young, basically I just wanted to figure out a way to save the world. So I thought maybe I should be an attorney and a judge and a senator, work in the United Nations, learn languages. I loved languages. So I had all those ideas in my head because I did not think being a professional artist was even a consideration, because I was raised that we're expected to be professionals, doctors, lawyers, etc., to make good money and have a happy life. And that was what was important, to have financial security. And that was what was respected and expected. So the first time it even entered, even though for me, dance and art was everything, but I never thought it could be my career. So I, at one point when I was in ballet training, a friend of mine suggested I take this jazz class because it helps with extensions and other parts of technique. And there was this really good teacher, and I went to this jazz class, and the teacher left on a vacation and left an older student in charge. And my mother sat down and talked to her in the lobby with me. And she was telling my mother that she was a professional dancer and she was moving to New York. And it was the first time I'd ever known anybody that had done that. It wasn't like something that anyone I knew would even think of doing. So as I'm listening to my mother talk to this person, it just like clicked in my mind, oh, like that's something one can do. Like I could actually be a dancer. Like that could be my job. And I thought that was just life-changing, because I really just did not consider it before. And of course, my parents were not happy when I decided to do that, because they wanted me to have a happy life, and they thought that it was a very difficult life, and they didn't want to see me struggle and sacrifice so much. But I continued in dance and acting, during those years. And eventually my teacher, when she took us to see the flamenco performance, it was Jose Molina, Bailes Españoles, that was one of the companies that was most active touring the United States at the time, which at that time, nobody, even in Spain, nobody did a pure flamenco concert. It was Bailes Españoles, which are Spanish dances. So that includes classical Spanish dance, folkloric dance, and a little bit of flamenco. And so of course, the minute I walked into that classroom, and of course I was 15 and I was in the beginners class, so everybody else was 5 or 6, because the other girls my age were advanced already. And I walked into the classroom, and I stood in the first line, and Jose Molina struck a pose, and I imitated him, and he stopped and did a double take, and he said, "You are going to be very good Spanish dancer." And I just melted, because I thought, oh my goodness, like this incredible dancer thinks this. So that was very affirming at the time. So I was at that school for 5 years, and I even taught Spanish dance at my ballet school eventually. And I was, this is during junior high and high school. And then Jose Molina would come every year and teach as a guest teacher at this school. Luisita Sevilla was the teacher in this school that had this school. And they would do a concert at the end of the year, and he would choreograph for the concert and dance with Luisita. So every year I got to work with Jose Molina on his choreography. And so as you might guess, my dream at that time was to be in his company. So one day I got a phone call from Jose Molina saying, one of my dancers is injured. Would you like to come to New York and do a concert for me? And so of course I went running. I was 22 years old. And I went to New York, and then I was hired by 2 other Spanish dance companies in New York. And I danced with these 3 different Spanish dance companies for a season. And then I realized I really wanted to do pure flamenco. I didn't want to do so much of all of the classical and folklore, although that was a very good training. It's not really what I wanted to do. So I decided to move to Spain. And interestingly enough, I also, when I was like getting ready to move to Spain from New York, I saw an advertisement that the Actor Studio was holding auditions. And of course, that was my other dream, to be an actor. And the Actor Studio was, a very important school at the time. So I said, well, I'm going to audition, see what happens. So I auditioned at the Actor Studio for Lee Strasberg himself, and I was accepted. And then I had to make this decision. Okay, do I stay in New York and go to the Actor Studio, or do I go to Spain? And I just thought to myself, you can act when you're old, you have to dance when you're young. Go to Spain, see what happens with flamenco and dance. Do the most you can with dance first. And that's what I did. And I literally called my parents and let them know I'm moving to Spain. And that was that. And so I moved to Spain, and I think the first week I got there, I got my first job with a company because I had been trained very well. I don't know how much of it is talent and how much of it is training, but for whatever for whatever reasons, I was always working from the minute I got there. I was touring with different companies. And there's a school in Madrid that's very famous, and I knew to go there. That's all I knew, is to go to Amor de Dios in Madrid, because many different teachers teach there. And a lot of famous dancers, when they're not on tour, they teach there. So you get the opportunity to be exposed to all of the best artists, and both dancers and musicians. So it was an amazing experience, and I lived there for 5 years, touring with different companies. And then when I was not on tour, I was taking classes, and I was just so fortunate because I got to work with the best artists of that era, which is known as, also that happens to be known as the golden age of flamenco. This was in the early 80s. So from the 60s and 70s into the 80s was a time in flamenco where you had so many great artists performing and evolving and developing the art form. So it was just the most amazing time. It was really wonderful. And after that, when I was ready to start my own company, I always had in my mind that I was going to have my own dance company from a very early age, even before flamenco, even when I thought it might be some form of modern dance or, my own thing. I didn't know quite what it was going to be. I would have dreams of whole ballets. I would dream the whole thing, choreography, the costumes, everything. And I performed dance whenever I got the chance in community theater, opportunities. And I did a lot of choreography and improvisation and things like that. And I was also really lucky. The synagogue we belonged to had theater, and we did theater there. So I was in a lot of plays at our synagogue. So that gave me a great opportunity as well, to develop as an actor. But I really knew I wanted to have my own company. And at that time, as a woman, as a foreigner, there was no way I was going to be able to have my own company in Spain. So I had to move back to Miami. I thought Miami's a good place to start a flamenco company because there are a lot of Latin Americans, and the art scene was just very new at the time. And I said, I think that's going to be a great place for the arts to grow and for flamenco to be embraced. And I have family and I know people there. So so I came home, and I opened a school and a company at the same time, because my idea was to train dancers for my company, or just train people to be educated flamenco aficionados that would be future audiences. And so in 1985, I opened a studio, a company, and a school. And from there we developed the company, and I developed in many different directions artistically with this company.